Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 14 of the 11th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Okay, before I start here, forgive my voice. I've had a very scratchy throat today. I'm not too sure what's going on. I don't know if I'm coming down with a cold or something, but I'm a little bit more raspy than usual. Don't worry, I haven't started smoking. But as I look around the podosphere, I do see lots of shows and lots of hosts doing year-end lists. So I thought, hey, why the heck not? But unlike those other really cool hit podcast hosts, I'm just going to give you 8 albums that I discovered in 2024 rather than 8 that were actually released in 2024. Well, I should say 8. 7 that I discovered and 1 that I rediscovered and ended up forming a strange relationship with. The past year has been an excellent one for me in a lot of ways. It was my first year as an adult without having a drop of alcohol, and I wrote at some length about this on my blog, which I'll link to in the episode notes, but for the sake of brevity, I'll just quote the last paragraph. I quit drinking because I wanted to, not because I had to. I recognized that I was drinking out of habit more than anything else and decided to change that habit. I don't miss drinking. I never think about drinking, and I've heard that people who quit smoking spend considerable mental energy thinking about smoking. I don't do that, thankfully. I don't have any burning desire to go back to it, and I'm 100% comfortable around anyone who is drinking. More importantly, I don't think it's changed my personality one bit. So, depending on which side of the fence you sit vis-a-vis my personality, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. For me, though, it's been a great decision that I'm very, very happy I made. I also started getting back into exercising this year. It's been hit and miss, and I haven't made the strides I was hoping to, but I'm determined for 2025 to get myself back into real shape, and the shape that I was in around the time that I started this podcast, actually. So that means losing about 28 pounds and getting back into running in a serious way, both of which I'm really looking forward to. Other than that, I released 59 episodes of this podcast, 52 episodes of Seaside Pod Review, and 56 episodes of the Ultimate Catalog Clash. I'm also working on a First Watch podcast still with my Ultimate Catalog Clash co-host that we'll be releasing in the next 2 to 3 months. And guesting on another new podcast that my Ultimate Catalog Clash host, co-host Corey Morissette, will be dropping also in the next 2 to 3 months, named Rock Court, where I'll be arguing that Sammy Hagar is a better lyricist than David Lee Roth. So it's been a highly enjoyable, very busy year of podcasting. Thanks so much to all of you for your support over the last 12 months. It was too bad that I couldn't make the rescheduled dates down in Gainesville, but I'm already looking forward to hopefully being able to travel for this year's event. The other massive thing, of course, that happened to me, Tom Petty-wise this year, was the incredible generosity of my pal Dallas Elliker, who I'm going to thank once again for sending me a signed copy of Damn the Torpedoes and a poster from the Mudcrutch Fillmore gigs in 2008. Both now have pride of place in my music corner in my basement, framed on the walls. 2024 saw a couple of huge releases in the Pettyverse, namely the deluxe edition of Long After Dark and the Heartbreakers Beach Party documentary. I'm going to do a full episode on the documentary at some point, but I've started off my list of 8 albums for 2024 with this one. So, let's dig into it. I picked up both the blue vinyl release of Long After Dark and the black and red marble deluxe edition release. My plan is to frame up 1 disc of the blue and 1 disc of the red and black marble with the album cover and put it kitty corner to my signed Torpedoes disc and Mudcrutch poster. Undoubtedly, the highlight of the deluxe release for me is the set of French TV performances that are included. Had that been the entirety of the release, I think it would have been worth every penny alone. The version of Keeping Me Alive is absolutely fantastic, and the video footage of them performing it, clearly just having a whale of a time, really drives home how tight-knit they were during this period, not just as a band, but as 5 people, 5 human beings. That is, however, the only song I could have made an argument about being included on the album. And I don't remember what I said on my producer for a day, whether I included anything else, but I very much doubt it. When I listened to Turning Point, which we'd already heard in the playback box set, Don't Make Me Walk the Line and One on One, I hear really good songs that they just still aren't as strong as the tracks that made the eventual album. And all 3 of them are sonically similar to tracks that did make the album, so I can see how the band had decided to go with the original 10 songs that we ended up with. I do think there would have been room on the record for Keeping Me Alive, however, as it has a very different lilt to it than any other song on Long After Dark, and there would have been time to squeeze it on there in terms of sort of vinyl side constraints. Again, I'm not going to go super deep on the outtakes, as I'll be covering them completely on a future season, but Long After Dark, along with Into the Great Wide Open, is a record that I've ended up gaining a much larger appreciation for since I started this podcast. Howie Epstein notes in the liner notes of the deluxe edition that it sounds the way we sounded then. And whenever an album really captures the spirit of a band at a point in time, it's usually going to be a winner. So Long After Dark Deluxe Edition is the first album in my picks for 2024, but I won't rate this one, as I already did a full season on it, and you know how much I love this record. The second album in my list is one that could potentially be a surprise for people, as you might expect a middle-aged white guy to be a fan. But for almost their entire career as a band, I've turned my nose up at Metallica. The primary reason mainly has always been what I perceive to be the gross affectation that singer James Hetfield places on his vocal delivery at times. As my bestie Randy always jokes, James is going to the store to get a pack of smokes. Always makes me laugh when he does that. I was also never really into the thrash, speed, noisy, shouty variety of metal or rock, so I didn't think there would be much to appeal to me. For the second series of the Ultimate Catalog Clash, however, my pal Corey gave me 3 options and I didn't know what they were, so I picked number 2. And that meant that we covered the second era of Metallica, their 90s output, which included the self-titled Metallica, commonly known as the Black Album, Load and Reload. Now, I didn't come into this season with any Metallica baggage. I didn't know Cliff Burton from Jason Newsted or Kirk Hammett from Dave Mustaine. Well, the latter is somewhat of a lie, as I was aware of Megadeth and I knew that Mustaine had been part of Metallica at some point in its early days. Through the course of Season 3, though, I really got over my dislike of Hetfield's delivery and found that while the music was wildly inconsistent in quality, or the songwriting, let's say, the songs themselves inconsistent in quality, and really could have used a more technically proficient drummer, there was lots that I enjoyed and still do enjoy. I was really impressed with Hetfield's lyrical ability and really enjoyed the interplay of the 2 guitars and the bass. This prompted me to go back and listen to the first 3 records with what most fans consider the classic lineup. And I have to tell you that although it's not a genre I'll be digging into in great depth, the energy, raw power, and the honesty of those first 3 records really is compelling. And so I ended up recently purchasing 1986's Master of Puppets on vinyl. Is it a perfect album? No, not for me, but it scratches a specific itch and occupies a space in my collection that I don't know that any other band could fill. I don't think Metallica in the 90s were nearly as bad as some of the purists make out, but it's undeniable that their creativity and outright audacity was amped up to 11 on those first 3 records. So Master of Puppets is my second album of 2024. And I was thinking that what I'd do for these non-petty albums, and there are 7 of them, is what me and my season-end co-host John Paulson usually do on our album wrap episodes. I'm going to give you 3 songs to listen to from the album to try to persuade you that it's worth giving a go. So the first song in my Metallica EP is the title track, Master of Puppets. And I'll put a link to the version of this song included on Metallica's S&M concert that they performed with a full orchestra, arranged and conducted by none other than Michael Kamen in the episode notes. It's also funny to me that Metallica are labeled as a thrash metal band when, in my view, this song is just prog rock. I mean, albeit with a dirtier, harder-edged aesthetic, but with the time signature changes, longer instrumental sections, and epic scale lyrics, it shares a lot more musical DNA with a band like Genesis than it does with a band like Motorhead. Second track is the last on side A, Welcome Home (Sanitarium). which has a very dark, spooky vibe to it that really foreshadows a lot of the songs I heard on the 3 albums from the 90s that were reviewed on Ultimate Catalog Clash. Your last song from this album is an instrumental track titled Orion, which takes the second last spot on side B. And I've heard about people talk about Master of Puppets being the best heavy metal album of all time. Now, I'd be inclined to go with Black Sabbath or Iron Maiden in that conversation personally, or even, if you, depending on what you call in heavy metal, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, put out some pretty good albums in the early 70s. But nonetheless, I've really been enjoying this record. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. The next album I wanted to talk about is a big switch of gears, especially from Metallica. Sturgill Simpson is one of the most well-respected artists in country music right now, and like Tom, he has an unwavering, unrelenting decency and commitment to making his art his way without pandering to or patronizing his audience. As early as 2007, Simpson had expressed an interest in recording a bluegrass album, and in 2020, he entered the Butcher Shop recording studio in Nashville to reimagine songs from his catalog as bluegrass tracks. And I often find it insufferably hubristic when an artist does this sort of retrospective reworking of old material, but Simpson makes these already excellent tracks sizzle with an entirely different energy with his new arrangements. And I grew up a million miles from the twang of country music in general and wouldn't have been able to tell you the difference between bluegrass and honky-tonk growing up if my life depended on it. That is until I moved to Canada. And a combination of older age and the abandoning of any sort of pretentiousness around what's cool and what isn't led me to artists like Steve Earle, Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings, Del McCrory, Hank Williams, Margot Price, and I've grown to love really well-played, authentic country music, and especially the guitar playing. I actually discovered Sturgill's work after watching him play. He was playing backing guitar with John Prine after the late, great Mr. Prine passed away during the pandemic. How surprised I was to go back recently and realize that Paul Zollo actually hosted the panel discussion that accompanied that performance. The album, Cutting Grass Volume 1, as well as being a dazzling collection of songs, has one of my favorite album covers. On it, Sturgill is steering a riding lawnmower, and the cover is stylized as a green line drawing on a plain yellow background. Very striking, completely unmistakable. Okay, so the 3 songs I'm going to throw at you from this album are, first up, Sometimes Wine, which is a cover of an old tune that Simpson performed with his old band Sunday Valley. And I will definitely leave a link to a live performance of that song in the episode notes because it is absolutely cooking.
I have always tried to keep my glass full. sometimes it's wine. Baby, why is it whenever your glass is empty, you come along, knock over mine? I'd like to tell you I can't make it without you, and I won't shed a tear when you walk out that door. Lord knows I've been down that road a time or two, but then I've never been without you before. I couldn't tell you how much I paid for the bottle.
The next song is the lead track on the album, All Around You, which is a wonderful 3/4 time jag with a very stripped back arrangement that is enhanced by lots of intricate detailing.
Time slips away, skies slowly fall, feeling new on a universal heart, flowing, flowing all around.
The last song in my Cuttin Grass EP is the fantastic Turtles All the Way Down, in which Sturgill contemplates the great ontological mysteries of the universe.
Well, tell me how you make it ego something that you're making our brain. Some say you might go crazy, then again it might make you go sane. And every time I take a look inside that old and fabled book, I'm blinded and reminded of the pain caused by some old man in the sky. But that marijuana and LSD, psilocybin and DMT, they all change the way I see. Love's the only thing that ever saved my life.
This is the perfect record to put on if you want to unwind and just listen to a master craftsman at work with a bunch of exceptional musicians backing him. And for me, Cuttin Grass is an 8 out of 10. The fourth album in my list, I'd say is probably the strangest in my vinyl collection at the moment. Many people would know Bjork from her cover of the old big band tune, It's Oh So Quiet.
It's oh so quiet. Shh, shh. It's oh so still. Shh, shh. You're all alone. Shh, shh. And so peaceful until you fall in love. Sing from the sky up above. Sing from is caving in. Wow, wow. You never been so nuts about a guy you wanna love. You wanna cry, you cross your heart and hope to die.
If you think that's what Bjork sounds like, more or less, strap in, because the album Homogenic goes into very, very different areas. And I'll admit that Iceland's biggest export other than the Northern Lights tours eluded me for years, and I only latched onto this record after listening to a review of it on the fantastic Misty Music podcast. The conceit of that show is that two friends, David and Lucy, take turns in bringing albums to the other person that they haven't heard before. The hosts have an exceptional warmth and easy flow to the conversation that only old friends really do have, and spending an hour and a half in their company listening to them talk about music is a joyful way to spend your time. I'll leave a link in the episode notes to the show in which they discuss this album which was Bjork's third record released in 1997. So why do I say it's the strangest in my vinyl collection? Well, first of all, it's a fairly long way away from what I traditionally listen to. There isn't a guitar anywhere near this album other than bass guitar. Second, much of the music I'd describe as mood and vibe rather than melody and narrative. Lyrically, I'd say that Bjork shares some musical DNA with our pal Bob Dylan. Take lines like, "I'm a fountain of blood in the shape of a girl. You're the bird on the brim, hypnotized by the whirl." Quite Dylan-esque, isn't it? But unlike Dylan's sparse acoustic or live band arrangements that he tended towards, Bjork uses layer upon layer of synths, real orchestral instruments, percussion, and vocal texturing that create this disorienting, sometimes bewildering oral experience. It took me weeks to figure out if I actually liked this record, or if I was just fascinated with it in the same way some people are fascinated with pimple popping videos, say. It's an album, though, that heavily rewards multiple listens and has started me on a journey of digging into an artist I knew nothing about and have come to massively respect. I think she's a little like Lady Gaga in that plenty of people maybe don't enjoy her music, but will think that she's and recognize that she's a bona fide artist who is authentically and purely herself without a millimeter of compromise. So the first track on my Homogenic EP is Bachelorette, which features the lyric I quoted above. Listen to the eccentric vocal delivery and the abrasive rhythmic nature of the instrumentation. Okay, have I lost most of you? Okay, well, track 2 isn't going to get any easier to reconcile with the love of Tom Petty, trust me. This one is the lead album track, the trippy, trancy third single, Hunter.
Searching and home, what's been found, I'm not stopping. I'm going hunting. I'm the hunter.
Okay, look, if you're hating this music, there's only one more track to go, so stay with me. So for the closure of this EP, I picked a much more delicate, beautiful track titled Unravel.
In a ball of yarn, devil collected, I with a grin, I will laugh. In a ball of yarn, you'll never return.
Look, I'll level with you. I'm still not 100% sure what to do with this album. I don't know exactly what lies at the center of its enigmatic hold on me, but damn it, we're going 8 out of 10 again. Alrighty, folks, now that I've upset the sonic apple cart with some Icelandic orchestral synth pop, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this. What was the last single Tom released, with or without the Heartbreakers, which charted on the Billboard Hot 100? Was it A, Swingin', B, Saving Grace, C, I Should Have Known It, or D, You Get Me High? Well, Swingin' hit number 11 on the Adult Alternative Airplay chart and number 17 on the US Rock chart. I Should Have Known It hit number 4 and number 40 on those two charts respectively, and You Get Me High's only position was number 2 on the AAA chart. And that was the last time one of Tom's singles would reach that lofty position on any chart. So your answer is B, Saving Grace, which, by the skin of its teeth, reached number 100 on the Billboard chart back in 2006. The single did also make number 26 on the rock chart and peaked at number 1 on the Adult Alternative Airplay list. So your question for this week is this. Which New York State venue was the last place that the Heartbreakers played Saving Grace live? Is it A, the Beacon Theatre, B, Madison Square Garden, C, Forest Hills Stadium, or D, the Saratoga Performing Arts Center? Okay, my fifth album is the one I had heard, in fact owned, before last year, but I didn't really like it. Well, that's an understatement. Let's rewind to about 1987-ish. My best friend growing up, who I've talked about before and who died, unfortunately, the same year that Tom did, introduced me to this American band that I'd never really heard of, Van Halen. I was transfixed by the playing of this mad genius on guitar, but it was the Hagar era of Van Halen, and 5150 was the album that my pal Birchie played for me, not the Roth era party band Van Halen. And I got to tell you, it hit me like a freight train. From Sammy's opening, "Hello, baby," and that screaming lead guitar into Al's monolithic drum parts and Michael Anthony's thunderous bass lines, laid on top of all this, the gigantic pop melodies and hooks, I was in. From that point, I bought every subsequent Van Halen album, including the album on my list, Van Halen III. I wasn't initially aware that Hagar had left the band or that they'd recruited extreme lead singer Gary Cherone to replace him. But when the album was released, I dutifully went out and bought it. I must have already been over in Canada as the album came out in March of 98, so I imagine I listened to it up in my cramped, tiny two-man room in Suffield, Alberta while I was still in the military. What came out of the headphones was not what I was expecting. At all. Where were the monolithic drums? Where were the signature Van Halen hooks and harmonies? This was a weird, weird album, and I discarded it almost immediately. I think I probably only listened to it once, maybe twice. It wasn't what I wanted Van Halen to sound like. Jump forward, no pun intended, to 2003 and my discovery of And the Podcast Will Rock, co-hosted by my now good friend and Ultimate Catalog Clash co-host, Corey Morissette. Through being involved in that podcast as both an increasingly frequent guest and a Patreon subscriber, I found a community of rabid Van Halen fans and reignited my love for the band. I also became online friends with a fellow named Scott Monroe, who had ideas about how certain Van Halen songs could be made better with some judicious editing. Van Halen 3 was a train wreck of a production. Ed was sober for the first time in the recording studio. His brother Al was not, to the point that he couldn't take part in most of the recording, with Ed himself playing almost all the drums. Michael Anthony was reduced to a bit part player, again Ed playing most of the bass, and instead of bringing in a powerhouse producer to help him realize this dream of these very, very different sonic ideas that he was exploring, Ed instead enlisted his friend Mike Post. Yes, the Law and Order guy. Unfortunately, Post was simply an enabler who basically said yes to every moment of self-indulgence and eccentric decision-making that would bog this album down. On release, it was a critical and commercial flop. The label even shoehorned one song, Fire in the Hole, into the latest Lethal Weapon movie to try to generate some buzz, but eventually, Ed's side project, and really what should have been a solo record probably, fizzled out and Gary Sharon's short tenure with the band was over. Last year, some friends I met on Corey's show decided to do a deep dive podcast into this album, including the aforementioned Scott Monroe. The show was the third installment in the Regarding Series podcast, which had previously covered Metallica and Lou Reed's just ill-advised collaboration, Lulu, and Roger Waters' Dark Side of the Moon Redux, which, again, is just, what are you doing, Rog? Don't need to do it. No one needs to hear this. Just leave it alone. It's a very highly entertaining, massively irreverent show, and Scott Monroe, like I said, one of the co-hosts, approached me about editing some of the songs on the album to see if they could be improved. This progressed to reimagining the entire album, which we released at the same time as the first episode of the podcast. Our friend at the Van Halen News Desk, Eric Senich, released this remix on the Van Halen News Desk Twitter account, and it went viral in a small way, being picked up by rock magazines and metal websites and this type of stuff, generating a lot of discussion about a forgotten album in one of the all-time great rock catalogs. So since doing that remix, I found a lot of really, really interesting work going on in Ed's playing and composition, and think that had the album been better produced, trimmed down, and released as a solo project, it could have been a really successful creative outlet for Ed, aside from Van Halen. As it was, the critical pounding it took really rocks the great man, and he went back to Roth and previously trodden ground for the band's last album. I would have much preferred to see a second solo effort, perhaps with different guest singers and musicians in the same vein as Santana's Supernatural. All in all, it's still a weak album in its released form and ended up being neither a full exploration of new musical directions from Ed, nor a building on the stadium rock sound of Balance. Instead, we get this incoherent mishmash that is poorly engineered and produced and lacks the razzle-dazzle that the great Van Halen records always brought us. So the first track I'm going to play from this is the one that really lost most of the hardcore Van Halen fans immediately, including me at 25 years of age. It's a song that sounds way more like U2 than anything else and is titled Once.
Can't never be separated.
The next track in my VH3 EP is the really cool Andy Summers-esque pop number that suffers from some fairly weak lyrical moments, but might just be my favourite song on the record now. And I'm looking forward to seeing if we can recut this one for a second time for Regarding Van Halen 3. This is Dirty Water Dog. The last track I'll offer up to represent the album is more what you might have expected from a Van Halen record in 1998, and one of the few tracks, possibly the only track on the album, that features the entire band performing. This is the lead single from the album, Without You. In the revised, shortened format, the edited format that Scott and I reimagined the album in, I'd probably give it a 6, and more likely a 7 out of 10, because it does still feature one of the greatest virtuoso guitarists of all time playing on it, and some very cool musical ideas are explored. But in its released format, I'll give it a 4 out of 10. I just wanted to include it in this list because this album occupied a lot of my thoughts this year, and it's one of the biggest sort of reversals, not quite a 180, but almost a 180 degrees shift on what I thought of this album when I first heard it to what I think of it now that I've sort of got to grips with it a little bit more, which does show you that sometimes you do need to listen to an album more than once. Okay, next up is another band that I discovered through the Deep Dive podcast network that I always name check at the end of this show when I was still on Twitter. Every now and again, I'd click on a link that someone in Metal Twitter had posted, and you can't see I'm doing the air quotes there, Metal Twitter. And I almost always think, nah, it's too heavy for me, or it's just not quite my thing. But a couple of times I clicked, listened, and thought, whoa, this is great. Mastodon, Crack the Sky, I discovered through just randomly clicking on people's recommendations. And so it also was with the band that I'm presenting to you now, Green Lung, and their album, This Heathen Land. This is an indie metal band from the UK that blend sort of Black Sabbath, lots of Black Sabbath, but with like Queen elements and Dio and all sorts of other wild and wonderful influences. But they bring them all into this fantastic cohesive album that is conceptually and melodically consistent. So I ended up picking up their third album on vinyl at my local indie store. And when I paid for it, when I checked out, I was a little surprised that it had a $46 price tag. Usually, new albums are around the sort of 32-ish Canadian dollar price mark. But on getting it home, I discovered that it was the 12-inch transparent green and white marble vinyl in gatefold sleeve. So as well as loving the music on this record, the packaging is elite level, including a 16-page booklet, a pocket map of this heathen land illustrated by Richard Wells, the album art designer. The subgenre of metal that Green Lung are usually slotted into ranges from stoner rock to doom metal, and then like hard rock and occult rock are often mentioned. The lyrical themes definitely land more in the folklore, occult type area, in a similar way that Zepp and Dio did. And hearing the term doom metal might be off-putting to some of you, but it's really just a modern-day take on what Sabbath were doing in the 70s. So if you like Black Sabbath, I almost guarantee you'd like these guys. One of the things I love most about this band is that they very clearly spend a lot of time on writing and arranging their songs. Every track on this record feels like it's one of the band's favorite children. You get the sense that every second of every song is intentional and trying to say something. And that meticulous attention to detail, coupled with superb craftsmanship and technical ability, combine to make for a very well put together listening experience. The other great thing about this band is that This Heathen Land isn't a flash in the pan, or it isn't orders of magnitude above their previous work. All three of their albums, released in 2019, 2021, and 2023, are high quality and consistent. So if you like the three songs that I'm going to play, you'll definitely like the band overall, and you'll dig all three albums. So the first song I'm going to play is the lead track. And I think it's important with this album to get a sense of the mood the band is trying to build. So this is the first track. I'm going to actually play you two tracks. One is the entire prologue. It's called Prologue. And then we go straight into Forest Church.
Beyond the cities and motorways of modern Britain, away from the influence of its Christian churches and cathedrals, lies another country. An older, stranger country. A country of lonely tors and desolate moors, of forgotten woods and mysterious standing stones. You are about to embark on a journey into occult Albion. Come, it's time to explore this heathen land.
love how heavy but melodic that track is. The next song I'll play for you is one of the only songs I've ever heard that features, I believe, a stylophone lead. You wouldn't expect this in a heavy, doomy rock band, but it works so effectively. This is Maxine (brackets Witch Queen).
Sky flat and sodden, and you stood beneath the sea of stars. Forever my high priestess, Maxine. Nocturnally, I still see you in my dream. Maxine, in front of me.
The last song I'll throw at you is the fantastically riff-heavy penultimate track and the main inspiration for the album cover art, Hunters in the Sky. For me, this record harkens back to the old heavy metal I grew up with, but updates it with a modern production, losing none of its heart. I love this record top to bottom, so I'm going to give it a really solid 8.5 out of 10. Okay, your next album is by a band who actually opened for the Heartbreakers on most dates of 2005's For the Hell of It tour. The Black Crowes have been one of my favourite bands since I heard their debut record, Shake Your Moneymaker, in probably around 1992-93 when I was introduced to it by a roommate when I was still in the army. The album was 2 or 3 years old by then, and I'd probably heard Hard to Handle, but nothing else really. And over the years, they're one of the very few bands I've kept up with who I basically love every album. So when they announced a new record last year, I was all over it, and I went out and bought it on release day. And I got to tell you, that's the first time, I'm pretty sure that's the first time I bought a new album on vinyl on release day in decades. Like, I think since I started getting back into vinyl 2-3 years ago. I didn't listen to any of it online ahead of time, so the first spin was completely pure and completely joyous. The Crowes were back to their cooking, rocking best. Chris Robinson's vocals sound just as fresh and just as immediate as they did on those early albums, and Rich Robinson's fantastic riffs and slide guitar licks come screaming out of the speakers from the get-go. One of the things I've always loved about the Crowes is how effortlessly cool they are. Almost every song has a killer line or two in it, in the same way that Tom always found super interesting phrasings and lyrical choices. Check out this line from the opening track. If you don't want my diamonds, don't shake my tree. Girl, you think you know what's good for me. The other thing that struck me about the record immediately was how tight it is. The Crowes have been known to indulge in a little jamming out over the years and, taking their time, creating, 5-6 minute extended bluesy numbers. But at 37 minutes and just a few seconds, Happiness Bastards, the name of the album, is lean and mean. Gone are the 5-6 minute bluesy numbers, and instead we get 10 songs clocking in closer to 3.5 minutes, with only one song just a shade over 5 minutes. It's almost like they wanted to distill their career down to its basest elements and present those front and center for inspection. It's also one of those Crowes albums, like the debut or Right By Your Side, that more casual fans or non-fans would probably enjoy. If I was trying to indoctrinate someone into the Crowes, I'm not going to hand them Lions or Three Snakes, One Charm or After the Frost or Warpaint, but I might just give them this one. And man, with a title like Happiness Bastards, how can you go wrong? The first track I'll give you from this one is my favorite on the album. There's a very Petty-esque humor and strut to this one that I just adore. It's also peak Crowes groove and tone-wise and features a fantastic breakdown. This one is called Dirty Cold Sun.
Look into my eyes and tell me what you see. Can you see the fire burning inside of me? Yes, I'm freezing. Said I'm freezing. Got me freezing. Freezing cold. Yes, I'm freezing. Showing up, got me freezing. Said I'm freezing. Freezing cold, yeah. Me freezing. Me freezing.
The next track to listen to is another barn-burning, infectious riff. The second track on the record, this is Rats and Clowns, and I love the rhythmic staccato delivery that Chris uses to spit these lyrics out. It's an old-school rock and roller with a big slab of southern grease melted into its carcass.
Yeah, you've been seen downtown hanging with the rats and clowns. 60 feet on dirty streets, Arizona rubber sheets. Running nose and bleeding ear, how'd you get so far in here? Poison powder everywhere, but no one's got a grain to spare. Do you want some, baby? I know it's hard to get your fill. It's overflowing, baby. Yes, it's gonna spill. Yeah, you know what you're doing. Your touch gives me such a thrill. And if it ain't killed me yet, I said it never will.
The last track I'll offer you is the melodic, flowing southern ballad, Kindred Friend, which shows that other side to the Crows that is steeped and rooted in Skynyrd and the Allman Brothers.
What we have left, let's make it last. Got so far to go. Tomorrow owes nothing to the past. Day is open road. Let's stop pretending and write our own ending. Oh, kindred friend, where have you been? Guess it's been a while. Through thick and thin, many times again. Always make me smile.
Okay, I love the Black Crows, and this is their best album in almost 30 years for me. And it's so good that I didn't even miss Steve Gorman on drums. So it's a no-brainer, 9.5 out of 10. Okay, the last album that I'm going to talk about, but certainly not the least. 2024 saw me fall very deeply back in love with a band that I've been listening to almost as long as I can remember listening to music. In 1978, as Van Halen were making shockwaves on this side of the Atlantic, an unlikely-looking guitar god emerged from Newcastle and started a Hall of Fame career that began with the colossal bang of a sensational guitar solo. Sultans of Swing has a lot of guitar in it, but that final salvo that leads into the fade-out is now one of those guitar parts that most budding six-string slingers will attempt to learn at some point. The problem for most is that Knopfler comes from the old fingerstyle school of playing and doesn't use a pick, meaning his phrasing and attack on the strings just sounds a whole lot different than most players. Dire Straits were the subject of the recently completed fourth season of the Ultimate Catalog Clash, and introducing Corey to this superb band and one of my favourite bands has been one of the great joys of my year. Making Movies and Love Over Gold are both pretty much flawless albums for me, and each contains one of my favourite 10 songs ever written. On Making Movies, it's Romeo and Juliet, and on Love Over Gold, it's Telegraph Road. But the album I'm talking about here is not a Dire Straits record. After the gargantuan success of Brothers in Arms, Mark Knopfler decided to take a break and work on solo albums and soundtracks. He brought the band back together for one last hurrah 6 years later for On Every Street, but after that decided he'd rather not be in one of the biggest rock bands in the world anymore. Now, if you've never checked out Mark Knopfler's solo work, I'd highly encourage it. It's almost always laid back, frequently glittering, and always immaculately played. The cast of exceptional musicians that he surrounds himself with give his virtuosity the space it needs to shine at its brightest, and his palette of emotion and storytelling in his lyrics the bedrock to breathe. I picked up his latest release, One Deep River, on the strength of hearing one song, the lead track, Two Pairs of Hands. Because of Knopfler's vocal style, his voice simply hasn't aged. You could imagine most of the songs on this record on any one of the first 4 Dire Straits albums. The whole album is wistful, beautiful, and nostalgic as Mark takes us back through time and places to paint this very content, very self-assured, and richly enjoyable experience. And like the Crows album, with 12 songs clocking in at 51 minutes, there's no fat on One Deep River. Yeah, there are moments of instrumental reflection and mood setting, but there isn't a single gratuitous note or wasted bar. If this is the last album this legend ever puts out, it will be a perfect coda to a more or less perfect career. But let's hope there are many more albums to come. The first track I'll give you for my Mark Knopfler EP here, my One Deep River EP, is an easy piano-led little jam called Smart Money that is reminiscent of 60s Motown filtered through a country lens and then projected out from one of the most distinctive voices in music. And it actually reminds me a little bit of the last album that Dire Straits did, On Every Street, in that regard. Knopfler was exploring similar themes on that record.
Helicopters overhead, showbiz kids are getting wet. They already sold the shoe, the ring going on her finger, the slipper on her feet.
Second song I have for you could almost be a continuation or a novella set on the Telegraph Road. The first verse sets the scene so perfectly. It's the same old rodeo whenever it appears, the roughnecks and truck drivers, pipeliners and engineers. Our dusty little cow town turned into a boomtown fast. Guess we had to say so long to our little town of the past. This is Janine.
It's the same old rodeo whenever it appears. The roughnecks and truck drivers, pipeliners and engineers. Our dusty little cowtown turned into a boomtown fast. Guess we had to say so long to our little town of the past. Janine, my heart goes out to you. I know you've been trying, I've been trying too. Now there's big rigs on the highway.
The last song on this EP and the last song in this episode today is the one that made me immediately go out and buy the album. On double baby blue vinyl, no less. As soon as this lick starts, you know who it is. It's just simply unmistakable. And like our friend Mike Campbell does so often on Mojo, Knopfler leaves so much space between his notes that every single one of them gains a clarity and impact that busier work would render far less interesting and far less moving. This one is called Two Pairs of Hands.
roller coaster pining along. The power and the glory with the song. Holy moly, where did the time go? I told you, baby, now you know. I'm keeping the balls in the air. When I'm up here on the band, there'll be a little bit here and there. Still be trying to understand it, but they'll all be in the air. When I'm up here on the band, what it is I'm juggling here, I've only got 2 pairs of hands.
Okay, I don't think it'll be a surprise to really anyone that I'm rating this album a 10 out of 10. It's not a perfect album by any means, but it was a perfect album at the perfect time for me. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. Thanks for indulging me a little today. I hope you found a few songs that you might want to check out a little further, maybe even check an album or two out. I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2025 brings, especially musically. By the end of the year, I'll have wrapped up She's the One and Echo and should be moving on to The Last DJ. I might even be most of the way through that album. Do let me know what you think of this idea for a once-a-year special episode. And of course, let me know what you think of the albums I've discussed today, and especially if you've heard any of them. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. You can also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my best friend and sensationally talented musician, Randy Woods. Randy performs all the music you hear in the podcast and also composed and performed the podcast theme. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my great pal, Corey Morissette. I've talked about that show quite a lot on this episode, haven't I? We're currently doing a different type of format this season. Last season, as I said, we covered Dire Straits. This season, we are covering 10 albums from 1983. And as I'm recording this, we just released our first side of Pyromania by Def Leppard. And I got to tell you, folks, I wasn't a fan. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable. And again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will try to read out as many of your comments as I can on the show. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So when you're looking for Tom's music, please go to your local independent record seller, grab some physical media, go support local businesses, and then go to your official streaming platforms and listen to it on your phone. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, please go to tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook, and check out Tom Petty Radio, which is channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to finally get into the evergreen classic, Angel Dream, number 4. Bye-bye.